Shanda Renee Sharer, born June 6, 1979, was an American girl who was tortured and burned to death in Madison, Indiana, by four teenage girls. She was 12 years old at the time of her death. The incident attracted international attention due to both the brutality of the murder and the young age of the perpetrators, who were aged between 15 and 17 years old. The case was covered on national news and talk programs and has inspired a number of episodes on fictional crime shows. Shanda Sharer was born at Pineville Community Hospital in Pineville, Kentucky on June 6, 1979 to Stephen Sharer and his wife Jacqueline, who was later known as Jacqueline Vaught. After Shanda's parents divorced, her mother remarried and the family moved to Louisville. There, Shanda attended 5th and 6th grades at St. Paul's School, where she was on cheerleading, volleyball, and softball teams. When her mother divorced again, the family moved in June 1991 to New Albany, Indiana, and Shanda enrolled at Hazelwood Middle School. Early in the school year, she was transferred to Our Lady of Perpetual Help School, a Catholic school in New Albany, where she joined the girls' basketball team. There were four girls involved in Shanda's murder: Melinda Lovelace, Lori Tackett, Hope Rippey, and Tony Lawrence. In 1990, 14-year-old Melinda Lovelace began dating another girl named Amanda Hevron. After Melinda's father left the family and her mother remarried, Melinda behaved erratically. She got into fights at school and complained of depression, resulting in her receiving professional counseling. In March 1991, Melinda disclosed to her mother that she was a lesbian. Her mother initially was furious, but she eventually accepted it. As the year progressed, Melinda's relationship with Amanda deteriorated. Amanda Hevron and Shanda Sharer met in the early fall semester at Hazelwood Junior High when they got into a fight. However, they became friends while in detention for the altercation and later exchanged romantic letters. Melinda immediately grew jealous of Amanda and Shanda's relationship. In early October 1991, Shanda and Amanda attended a school dance where Melinda found them and confronted them. Although Amanda and Melinda had never formally ended their relationship, Lovelace started to date another older girl. After Amanda and Shanda attended a festival together in late October, Melinda Lovelace began discussing killing Shanda Sharer and threatened her in public. Concerned about the effects of their daughter's relationship with Amanda Hevron, Shanda Sharer's parents arranged for her to transfer to a Catholic school in late November. On the night of January 10th, 1992, Lawrence, age 15, Rippey, 15, and Tackett, 17, drove in Tackett's car from Madison to Melinda Lovelace's house in New Albany. Lawrence, while a friend of Tackett, had not previously met Melinda, who was age 16, though Rippey had met her once before and had got along with her well. Upon arrival, they borrowed some clothes from Melinda Lovelace, and she showed them a knife, telling them she was going to scare Shanda Sharer with it. While Tackett, Rippey, and Lawrence had never met Shanda prior to that night, Tackett had already known of the plan to intimidate the 12-year-old girl. Melinda Lovelace explained to the two other girls that she disliked Shanda Sharer for being a copycat and stealing her girlfriend. Tackett let Rippey drive the four girls to Jeffersonville, where Shanda Sharer stayed with her father on the weekends, stopping at a McDonald's restaurant en route to ask for directions. They arrived at Shanda's house shortly before dark. Melinda instructed Rippey and Lawrence to go to the door and introduce themselves as friends of Amanda Hevron, Melinda's former girlfriend and Shanda's current girlfriend. They invited Shanda to come with them to see Amanda, who was waiting for them at the Witch Castle. or Mistletoe Falls, a ruined stone house located on an isolated hill overlooking the Ohio River. Shanda could not go at the time that they invited her because her parents were still awake, so she told the girls to come back around midnight a few hours later. Melinda Lovelace was angry at first, but Rippy and Lawrence assured her about returning for Shonda later. The four girls crossed the river to Louisville and attended a punk rock show by the band Sunspring. Eventually, the four girls left for Shanda Sharer's house. During the ride, Melinda said she could not wait to kill Shonda. However, Lovelace also said she just intended to use the knife to frighten her. When they arrived at Shonda's house at 12:30 a.m., Lawrence refused to retrieve Shonda, so Tackett and Rippy went to the door. Lovelace hid under a blanket in the back seat of the car with a knife. Rippy told Shonda that Amanda was still at the witch castle. Shonda was reluctant to go with them, yet agreed after changing her clothes. As they got in the car, Rippy began questioning Shonda about her relationship with Amanda. Lovelace then sprang from the back seat, put the knife to Shonda's throat, and began interrogating her about her sexual relationship with Amanda Heverin. They drove towards Unica and the witch castle. Tackett told the girls that a local legend said the house was once owned by 9 witches and the townspeople burned the house down to get rid of the witches. At the witch's castle, they took a sobbing Shonda inside and bound her arms and legs with rope. There, Melinda taunted that she had pretty hair and wondered how pretty she would look if they cut it off, which scared Shonda even more. Melinda began taking off Shonda's rings and handed each to the girls. At some point, Rippy had taken Shonda's Mickey Mouse watch and danced to the tune it played. Tackett further taunted Shonda, claiming that the witch's castle was filled with human remains and Shonda would be next. To further threaten Shonda, Tackett then retrieved from the car a t-shirt with a smiley design and lit it on fire, but immediately feared that the fire would be spotted by passing cars, so the girls left with Shonda. During the car ride, Shonda continued begging them to take her back. Melinda ordered Shonda to slip off her bra, which she then handed over to Rippy, who slid off her own bra and replaced it with Shonda's while steering the car. They became lost, so they stopped at a gas station and they covered Shonda in a blanket. While Tackett went inside to ask for directions, Lawrence called a boy she knew in Louisville and chatted for a few minutes to ease her worries, but did not mention Shonda's abduction. They returned to the car but became lost again and pulled up to another gas station. There, Lawrence and Rippy spotted a couple of boys and talked to them before once again getting back into the car and leaving, arriving sometime later at the edge of some woods near Tackett's home in Madison. Next, Tackett led them to a dark garbage dump off a logging road in a densely forested area. Lawrence and Rippy were frightened and stayed in the car. Melinda and Tackett made Shonda strip naked. Then Melinda beat Shonda with her fist. Next, Melinda repeatedly slammed Shonda's face into her knee, which cut Shonda's mouth on her own braces. Lovelace tried to slash Shonda's throat, but the knife was too dull. Rippy came out of the car to hold Shonda down. Lovelace and Tackett took turns stabbing Shonda in the chest. They then strangled Shonda with a rope until she was unconscious, placed her in the trunk of the car, and they told the other girls that Shonda was dead. The girls drove back to Tackett's nearby home and went inside to drink soda and clean themselves when they heard Shonda screaming in the trunk. Tackett went outside with a paring knife and stabbed her several more times before coming back a few minutes later covered in blood. After she washed, Tackett told the girls what they were going to do next. At 2:30 a.m., Lawrence and Rippey stayed behind as Tackett and Lovelace went country cruising, driving to a nearby town. Shanda continued to make crying and gurgling noises, so Tackett stopped the car. When they opened the trunk, Shanda sat up covered in blood with her eyes rolled back in her head but unable to speak. Tackett beat her with a tire iron until she was silent and then told one of the girls to smell it. Melinda and Tackett returned to Tackett's house just before daybreak to clean up again. Rippey asked about Shanda, and Tackett laughingly described the torture. The conversation woke up Tackett's mother, who yelled at her daughter for being out late and bringing home the girls, so Tackett agreed to take them home. She drove to the burn pile where they opened the trunk to stare at Shanda. Lawrence refused. Rippey sprayed Shanda with Windex and taunted, "You're not looking so hot now, are you?" The girls drove to a gas station near Madison Consolidated High School, pumped some gasoline into the car, and bought a 2-liter bottle of Pepsi. Tackett poured out the Pepsi and refilled the bottle with gasoline. They drove north of Madison past Jefferson Proving Ground to Lemon Road off U.S. Route 421, a place known to Rippey. Lawrence remained in the car while Tackett and Rippey wrapped up Shanda, who was still alive, in a blanket and carried her to a field by the gravel country road. Tackett made Rippey pour the gasoline on Shanda, and then they set her on fire. Melinda was not convinced Shanda was dead, so they returned a few minutes later to pour the rest of the gasoline on her. The girls went to McDonald's restaurant at 9:30 a.m. for breakfast, where they laughed about Shonda's body looking like one of the sausages they were eating. Lawrence then phoned a friend and told her about the murder. Tackett then dropped off Lawrence and Rippey at their homes and finally returned to her own home with Melinda Lovelace. She told Amanda Heverin that they had killed Shanda Sharer and arranged to pick up Amanda later on that day. Later on the morning of January 11th, 1992, two brothers from Canaan were driving towards Jefferson Proving Ground to go hunting when they noticed a body on the side of the road. They called the police at 10:55 a.m. and were asked to return to the corpse. David Cam, who was later acquitted of his own family's murders, was one of the responding officers. Jefferson County Sheriff Buck Shipley and detectives began an investigation, collecting forensic evidence at the scene. They initially suspected a drug deal gone wrong and did not believe the crime had been committed by locals. Shonda's father, Steve, noticed his daughter was nowhere to be found early on January 11th. After phoning neighbors and friends all morning, he called his former wife, Shonda's mother, at 1:45 p.m. They met and filed a missing persons report with the Clark County Sheriff. At 8:20 p.m., a hysterical Lawrence and Rippey went to the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office with their parents. They both gave very rambling statements, identifying the victim as Shanda, naming the two other girls involved as best they could, and describing the main events of the previous night. Shipley contacted the Clark County Sheriff, and the Sheriff's Office was finally able to match the body of Shanda to the missing person report. Detectives obtained dental records that positively identified Shanda Sharer as the victim. Lovelace and Tackett were arrested on January 12th. The bulk of the evidence for the arrest warrants was Lawrence and Ripley's statements. The prosecution immediately declared its intention to try both Lovelace and Tackett as adults. For several months, the prosecutor and defense attorneys did not release any information about the case, giving the news media only statements by Lawrence and Rippey. All four girls were charged as adults to avoid the death penalty. The girls accepted plea bargains. All four girls had troubled backgrounds with the claim of physical and sexual abuse committed by a parent or an adult. Lawrence, Rippey, and Tackett all had histories of self-harming behavior. Tackett was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder and suffering from hallucinations. Lovelace, often described as the ringleader in the attack, had the most extensive history of abuse and mental illness issues. Tackett and Lovelace were sentenced to 60 years in the Indiana Women's Prison in Indianapolis. Tackett was released in 2018 and is serving probation for 1 year since her release. Lovelace is scheduled to be released in 2019. Rippey was sentenced to 60 years with 10 years suspended for mitigating circumstances, plus 10 years of medium supervision probation. On appeal, a judge reduced the sentence to 35 years. In exchange for her cooperation, Lawrence was allowed to plead guilty to one count of criminal confinement and was sentenced to a maximum of 20 years. All the girls have been released from prison except for Melinda Lovelace. In 2012, Shanda Sharer's mother made her first contact with Melinda Lovelace since the trials, although indirectly. Shanda's mother donated a dog named Angel in Shanda's name to Lovelace to train for the Indiana Canine Assistance Program through Project Two Heal, which provides service pets to people with disabilities. Melinda Lovelace has spent the last several years in prison working with dogs, training them for the Canine Assistance Program. Shanda Sharer's mother said she did get backlash for buying the dog and donating it to her daughter's killer, but she also stated that if you don't let good things come from bad things, nothing gets better, and I know what my child would want. My child would want this.